Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Phoebe Nerdle, the public sector lead at Atlassian. Now, Phoebe, before break, you mentioned a couple things like the changing way agencies and employees are working. You mentioned project management as one kind of trend. There's additional trends. What are they? And discuss them a little bit.
I would say one big trend we're seeing is the expansion of where you're able to recruit a talent pool from. I know that government agencies today are going through a lot of change, right? You have the baby boomer generation, which is getting into retirement. You have millennials and Gen Zers coming into those agencies, wanting to make an impact, wanting to make a change. But typically recruiting has been challenging because you recruit primarily from, if you're federal, the Washington, D.C. area. Obviously state and local is a little bit different, but there's great talent pools out there, even outside of the Bay Area or Austin. When you're going after some of that younger talent, you need to be able to have a little bit more flexibility in terms of bringing those candidates on board. I know Atlassian, for example, we're trying to leverage Atlassian Anywhere, which is our new policy where we're trying to leverage talent globally, not just in, again, the Bay Area or primary urban areas, but really access folks because they're going to be able to do the work and they're going to be a cultural fit and they're going to be able to bring something to the table. I think government agencies are seeing that as well, that's an additional flexibility that candidates today want and need in order to live a balanced lifestyle. We're also going to talk about at our event in February, our government symposium. We're on our sixth one now. It's an annual event. We're moved it virtually, and we're going to talk about a lot of the lessons that Atlassian has learned migrating our entire workforce to 100% remote, and share that with our customer base. So I would highly encourage your users to attend that as well.
All right, I was at the last one. It was in person. It was a fun event, so I'm sure people will can find out more information wherever they can do their Google searches on. But I want to go back to something you said, and it's the talent pool, which I think is a great point. Previously, agencies were, if there was a federal agency in Philly or Boston or Denver or wherever, and those cities, as we know, tend to cost more, tend to pay higher, tend to have more competition for talent, whether it's a cyber talent or a project manager talent or data scientist. But now you're able to look at places that maybe are facing higher unemployment, but you can train people. And because we've gotten this culture change of working remotely, that opens the door to a major change in how we recruit. When you talk to agencies and you talk to clients, are they starting to recognize that? Or are they starting to ask you for more? Hey, how are you guys addressing that? You mentioned you guys have a initiative. Are they asking for, if you will, best practices, lessons learned already?
Yes, I think you'll see more as obviously priorities start changing with a new administration as well. So we are trying to advise customers, but we're also still trying to figure it out ourselves. I think another big benefit to that is you're able to have a more diverse workforce because you're able to go after women who are working with kids at home and can only do jobs when they're working remotely, or more rural areas who have a lot of talent and a lot of knowledge to bring to the table, and a different perspective as well.
I think your point is really important, that the creates a more diverse workforce that lets you recruit from areas that maybe you normally wouldn't. And that comes back to a really important piece, which is the data, right? You got to understand the data. You got to understand what your data is, who's going to retire, what openings you have, what needs are you going to have today, what needs are you going to have tomorrow. So walk me through a little bit about how data is really driving a lot of this decision making.
So data is challenging for public sector, right? Because I would say commercially within Atlassian, the number one success factor is making sure your people have access to the right data and that there's a free flow of it. Obviously in public sector, there's some data that is accessible. There's some data that can't be accessible for security reasons. So it's a double-edged sword. I think that you still need access to that data and usability of it in order to achieve both the priorities and missions that you've been charged with as a public servant, but you have to make sure that the right people have access to the right data. So again, I think it ties in that balance of both innovation and security that you see more in public sector than you do in any other industry.
one of the things that we talk about the driving of data is you got to know what data you have, where it lives, and then how to use it, and then get it to the right person. We hear a lot of people talk about data draft dashboards and the like. I get the sense that these dashboards are being used more because of remote work, because we're not together. I can't give you a PowerPoint presentation. And then once I start using those dashboards, hey, this is pretty fun. This helps me. Do you see that as something that's really, again, another reason why the pandemic has been, there's some silver lining there, is agencies are understanding the value and others are understanding the value of data.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that goes back into productivity, right? You're right. We're not sitting through hour-long PowerPoint presentations anymore. I think we'll all kind of breathe a sigh of relief for that. You are able to access what you need when you need it. Dashboards, snapshots, high-level overviews, like really being able to pull out the overall themes of the data are critical. So it can't just be, hey, here's a ton of data, have at it and enjoy. You need to be able to direct that data in a useful way. And the way you do that, again, is through efficient collaborative tooling. And I think the number one thing that has helped Atlassian is just our ability to tag people in specific points. I constantly am digesting a large amount of data for my personal team and organization, and it would be really counterproductive to make everyone read, again, pages and pages of forecasts or product updates, but being able to say, hey, I know that my marketer is going to really need this one snippet, highlight it, comment it, bring her in there, and she's able to view it, comment on it, edit it, however we need to update that. That's been critical.
We talked earlier a little bit about the changes in work, and the couple other areas I just wanted you to go down the path on is this idea of task and work management. When you're at home, when you're in a remote environment, the way you approach your tasks, your how you manage your day to day is a little different, and that's something that agencies that I think have gotten used to. But as they move forward, as they hire differently, you talked about the diversity of hires, they have to get used to how agencies kind of they do the work when they have to get it done versus between 9 and 5 or 8 and 4. How has that idea of task and work management also evolved?
So I think prioritization is key. Knowing what you need to get done when. And then obviously being able to appropriately, not necessarily delegate, but again, collaborate with your colleagues and team members, and then be able to share that up the reporting structure, right? So it's very easy to think, okay, in a remote environment, I'm going to operate in a silo with just my team. That obviously cannot happen in public sector, right? Reporting structures are critical and they're there for a reason. Even in the commercial sector, they're critical and there for a reason. I need my boss to know what's both plaguing us and what's going well so that we can make the changes we need. In public sector, you need your boss or your director to know a lot of times for security reasons. So again, I think it's that feedback loop. And I think making sure that you're able to not just launch a project or complete a project, but that the entire reporting structure understands where you are with that project, when it will be launched. Are all the approvals in place? Do we have the public records straight? Any of those factors will feed in, and it's going to be more critical to our customers than probably any other industry.
It all comes back to this simple thing of communication. As you are talking, as you are, no matter if you're working from home or working in the office, you just need to communicate. And a lot of times people tend to communicate less when they're not seeing each other, right? You see each other in the hall. Hey, Phoebe, meant to mention to you this. You still need to do those things. And I think working remotely, that adjustment, that culture has happened. But I think for agencies to continue to work from home, to continue to have that remote experience and find success, they have to kind of press that idea. From an Atlassian perspective, how do you all ensure you're communicating when you work with your, coworkers? Are you on fill in the blank technology all the time, some IM type of tool?
We use a variety of different tooling. We use a lot of obviously our tooling because we drink our own Kool-Aid with Confluence, with Trello. We use standard email. We use chat tools, anything and everything across the board, I would say. Uh, what is what's critical is you basically put your most important functions though in those collaborative tools, so that as we bring on new folks and as we recruit and bring those folks onboarded, they know where to go, where to communicate, where to get answers, where to search for data. I will also say from a personal standpoint, I find communication almost a little, not necessarily easier, but I want to do it more, especially being at home in a semi-lockdown state. It's nice to know that there's other people out there and there's other adults to talk to and see how everyone's doing. So I think maintaining that cultural communication too is going to be critical, hopefully as things get better, and as a lot of states are able to emerge from this, that we maintain that connection. You don't want to just only talk about work with your colleagues. You need at least 5-10 minutes a day just to see how they're doing, right? We're all humans. It's been a really hard year. It's still challenging now. Having that personal connection is just as critical.
Right. Happy hours are not quite the same, but they still are just as important. I think we can't lose sight of that. The last
Absolutely.
topical area I just want to touch upon is this idea of project management. It's an area that agencies have struggled with for years. What are some of the continuing challenges you are seeing around project management, and what are they doing to overcome them?
I would say just scale, right? Like the scale of the projects that agencies are working on. It's really sometimes hard for commercial industry to understand an apple to apple comparison, right? When you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people being impacted versus thousands. Um, I think being able to communicate at all levels, updates around those projects, right? Again, we've talked about the report structure, but there's a part of it where you want everyone within an organization to understand at some level what's going on and when it's going to happen, and have that insight into what's critical for their work in their day. So it's both the bottom, the top, and the middle. Like, how are you able to share out those communications? How are you able to present project boards? How are you able to present retrospectives, get their feedback? Um, uh, it's going to continually evolve, I think, as new technology comes in and as things modernize and continue to go both to the cloud, or if you're hosting behind your firewall, even, you're going to need to have access to tooling that enables you to communicate across multiple different levels within your organization. And building that communication plan into your project plan is going to be critical as well.
Phoebe, we're just about out of time. I very much enjoyed this conversation. Before I let you go, what's the big takeaway from the experience we've had over the last 9 months around remote work? What should agencies keep in mind from our conversation today?
I think the number one takeaway is everyone should be really impressed with what they've accomplished in this last year, right? I mean, it's a huge transition. It's a huge transmission no matter what organization you work for. And you got to take a moment and just kind of pat yourself on the back. You kept the lights on. I think step two is figuring out, it's going to be a hybrid for a lot of workers, right? What's going to work remotely, what isn't going to work remotely. It's going to be very dependent on both the agency and the job function. But what are the learnings? Where does it make sense? What do you want to continue as you go forward? And hopefully, again, things start improving. As we start opening up different offices, what do we want to also bring in that we miss desperately? I think everyone's doing a lot of that evaluation now.
All right, I like that. Don't forget to enjoy the success, because it's important to recognize that it's been a rough 9 or so months, but there's a lot of success too. Unfortunately, we're out of time for today. So let me thank my guest, Phoebe Nerdle, the public sector lead at Atlassian. Phoebe, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Jason.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search innovation.